How we all doing this morning? Oh, I like the woo. Let's hear some noise. Get some energy flowing. Welcome to day 2 of CSEdCon. I hope you all had an amazing day 1. I was in some of the sessions. They were really engaging, a lot of great conversation, a lot of great questions, a lot of really awesome hallway discussions as well. So look forward to more of that today. We're going to hopefully fill your cup today with lots of things to talk about. I heard there were folks that did some interesting things last night, went to the Sphere, had a chance to take in some of the sites, so hopefully you all got a chance to also participate in the fun the city has to offer us. So, I'm Karim Megji. I'm the Chief Product Officer with Code.org, and I'm going to be hosting a panel this morning on the topic of AI and the future of work. So we'll get going with that. So as all good talks on AI do these days, I started by playing a bit with AI to help me prepare for this panel. So I prompted AI to basically envision the AI-enabled worker of the future. I'm gonna read for you what it says here. Some of you might not be able to read this. So this is ChatGPT and DALL-E 2 that helped me do this. So meet Sarah, whose day seamlessly incorporates AI. Her morning starts with AI sorting her inbox, flagging urgent emails, summarizing key points. In meetings, AI takes notes, generates action items, and suggests solutions based on past discussion. When she digs into work, AI analyzes vast amounts of data, offers customer insights, forecasts future trends, and potential market shifts, empowering her to make informed decisions on opportunities or risks that would otherwise take hours to uncover. AI has become Sarah's indispensable partner, amplifying her productivity, insights, and confidence in the modern work landscape. So there's some really interesting words there that AI generated for you, and I did this in like one shot with a little bit of editing, and that image was the first shot image, so not bad. I was mildly surprised, honestly, what happened. So we've all seen headlines like these predicting the future of work in an age of AI, from job loss to reskilling to automation to rise in global GDP occurring at the same time. The headlines are awash with fortune tellers and doomsayers on the future of work in an age of AI. I'm sure many of you have also seen data like this. Don't worry, I'm not going to give you a quiz on what the data points say. You probably can't see them, but what you should see here is a lot of dots to the right of that line that says average. So this is basically a visualization that the Washington Post created based on a research study that looked at the potential impact of AI on various occupations. And what they did was they measured the exposure of that occupation, given the tasks that the job entails, and what AI is good at. And so here, you're probably not going to be surprised. Management, business, and finance, higher possibility of exposure and impact. Science and computer science, what a lot of folks in this room are talking about, greater chance of impact there. Healthcare workers, another area where we see the potential for impact, and education and social services, things that we might care about in this room. So you might not agree to what extent this data is pointing at. I don't know if anyone really does know at this stage, but I think we can probably agree that AI will have a meaningful impact on knowledge-based work. Another set of interesting headlines, which we've all seen, that compare artificial and human intelligence. So here, assessments, which are obviously a key tool for us as a society to ensure that practitioners are skilled and knowledgeable for their future occupations. AI can now not only match human performance, but in many cases exceed human performance. And here's some data from OpenAI themselves that quantify on a percentile basis where AI would have scored relative to human performance. So, and then you can also see here, if you squint, the blue is GPT 3.5, and the green adds on what happens when we sort of throw GPT 4 at those tools. So in this session, we're going to discuss the how AI will impact the future of work. Our goal is to leave you with food for thought. We're not going to give you the answer to the question, because I don't think any of us know. We were talking about that this morning. So many open questions, lots of great discussions to have. But we are going to leave you with some food for thought and maybe some questions for you all to consider as you bring this very important topic into discussions and the work that you do. Okay, so with that, I'd like your help in welcoming our panelists to the stage. And I will start with Nicole Cario, who is Director of AI and Society at the Allen Institute for AI. Give it up. Thank you. Welcome, Nicole. Shanika Hope, who's the Director of Education for Social Impact at Google. You guys can make noise. Come on, let's make some noise. There we go. Thank you. Welcome, Shanika. And Michael Trucano, Visiting Fellow at the Brookings Institution. There we go. All right. Awesome. So we're going to start off here by getting to know our panelists a little bit. So I'd love to do a warm-up question with you all. Okay. So the question is, what was your aha moment with generative AI in your work? So specifically what I mean is, when did you personally or maybe viscerally realize the potential for AI to change work for good or for otherwise, maybe for not good? I'll let you all decide what that moment was. I'll start with my moment. My moment was, so I have a computer science and an engineering background, but I haven't written code in 15 years. So, and I wanted to do a little thing at work where I was trying to bring a little bit of technology into a piece of work that I was doing. And I thought, well, let me see what AI can do here. And in about an hour, which blew me away, I was able to essentially solve this problem that probably would have taken me multiple days to kind of reskill myself on the tools of coding and go through that whole process. So that was the moment when I was like, okay, this is going to be a really meaningful change for us. So who wants to go next? How about Nicole?
I think for me, so I work at an artificial intelligence research institute, and so the teams that I work with are the ones creating technology that's powering a lot of the things that are happening today. And so for me, it was actually seeing their response and watching them say, oh, this is a big, giant leap forward. One of our teams at AI2 was focused on, their charge was reasoning and how do we help this technology pass an 8th grade science exam, for example. They achieved that in 2019. That was not that long ago. And so to see the giant leap that ChatGPT brought forth, and also to see the giant momentum that it had within just pop culture, that's when it was the moment for me.
Yeah, I would echo both of your comments. I think at the work that I lead at Google, we are focused on understanding those factors that drive or create kind of leapfrog momentum in ensuring that there is equitable access and participation to computing. And I think and it was actually in November of last year when ChatGPT came onto the education scene, we were floored by the rapid and the accelerated visibility and adoption of that tool. And one of the things that we did is we actually did some analysis around standards alignment work. Specifically focused on trying to understand efficiencies that it could potentially bring into the classroom for educators. And in a previous life prior to Google, 20 years in public education, I've led a number of curriculum experiences where we adopting new curriculum standards, et cetera, moving it into public comment. We were able to move through a standards alignment exercise that normally would take months in a matter of hours. And it just floored us with 80+% accuracy, by the way. Pretty incredible. And so for me, that was probably one of the first oh my goodness, wow, this can be pretty powerful, can create a bit of a superpower for the work and the things that we're trying to accomplish, not just in the classroom, but in the workforce as well.
Yeah, thanks, Grim, and thanks everyone. My personal aha moment, I've been playing around with generative AI tools for a while in ways that I thought could help me be creative, where I couldn't be because I just didn't have the skills. But I think my real aha moment with ChatGPT, we all have drudgery in parts of our jobs, parts of our lives. And I worked at the World Bank for 26 years, and I would constantly be asked to do last-minute briefings for important people. And I got a note from someone last December, and they said, we've got some important person coming in. We need a briefing sheet in the next hour. And it was a topic I worked on, but I hadn't worked on it for quite a while. So I just had had ChatGPT summarize my previous work, gave me a quick briefing sheet. I just annotated a little bit, sent along, and I thought, this is a part of my job that I hate. And now hopefully won't have to do it as often. And that was really my aha moment, I guess I would say.
I love it. Thank you all for sharing those. Yeah, so many interesting ways in which we all experience AI in this early stage. So I want to get to sort of one of the heart of the questions we're going to talk about today. But I want to set it up a little bit. So this morning we came in a little bit early to to just mic test and whatnot. And we got in a nice chat about TV shows that we watch. You're going to hear a little bit about that maybe throughout the session. One of the TV shows that we were talking about was Black Mirror. I can barely see you all, but just even like wave your hand. Black Mirror, have you seen it? Are you familiar with it? Okay, so kind of a little bit technophobia, dystopian view of the future with technology, and so I think a little bit of even this conversation might touch on that. So I'm going to hearken to that conversation and ask the first question, which is, overall, are you bullish or bearish on the impacts that AI can have on work? And tell us a little bit about why, and maybe Shanika, if you can lead us off.
Yeah, sure. I would say I am quite bullish about the opportunity of AI in terms of transformation in the workforce. We know and recognize and understand that technology has shaped and changed the anatomy of workforce for decades. But the opportunity of artificial intelligence, I think, this is new for us in terms of really understanding the scope, the size, the speed, the depth of that transformation. That's something that we're all still learning and trying to understand together. But when you take a look at a lot of the early signals and a lot of the research that's coming out of places like the World Economic Forum, some of the headlines that Karim showed earlier, you look at some of the work that McKinsey has put out, what we're finding, based off of some of these early signals, is that in the next 10 years, 70% of the workforce, global workforce, will be touched in some way, shape, or form by generative AI. Specifically, the knowledge work sectors. Based on early signals, we're seeing that there will be roughly a 50% impact in terms of productivity and efficiency in the knowledge workforce. And when we say knowledge, these are typically the careers that are typically mid-high skilled, typically high wage, where you oftentimes see, or the types of skills that are being asked of knowledge work is that of synthesis, analysis, pulling together information, design in terms of like first drafts. Generative AI, based on the early signals that we're seeing, will absolutely have a substantial impact on those kinds of on those sectors, and that's also tied to what generative AI actually is. It's based on large language models that are pulling in a lot of information, using algorithms that are leaning in on probability and statistics to try to predict the next sets of words. And so when you think about that and you think about what the knowledge sector does, it would make sense that generative AI would have implications in the knowledge sector, probably at greater implications than in other spaces. And again, when I say transformation or change, we're talking about productivity and efficiency. And so that's not to create fear for those types of industries. What it really is it's to frame it to help us to understand that the parts of the work that can be unique to the human, it frees us up to focus in on more of the complex and more sophisticated and nuanced aspects of our work, and leverage the power of artificial intelligence to help with automation.
Love that point. Yeah, awesome. Nicole, Michael, your thoughts, bullish or bearish?
Yeah, so yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll say I've worked for a quarter century in institutions filled with economists. I'm not one, and with labor economists. I'm not a labor economist. So some of my colleagues will no doubt take issue with some of the things I say. But I know that would take greater issue with things that they say between each other, given the way economists are. So with that caveat out of the way, I'm bullish for education. Yeah, I think the potential returns on education and the importance and centrality of education, I don't see how not to be bullish with that. On the flip side, inequality, which is the defining feature of our societies around the world today. And the real worry, I think legitimate worry, is that we're going to be increasingly polarized as there are increased returns to certain types of labor. What are we going to do as a society with people who are, left behind, who lose jobs? I'm overall bullish, but of course, as with any sort of automation or with technological advances, there are going to be certain groups, there are going to be certain geographies who really suffer a lot. And with what's happening with AI, generative AI now, some of this will happen quickly. I think most of it will happen over the medium term. With autonomy and vehicular autonomy, there was a big prediction that truck drivers are going to go away, and that's going to, I mean, truck driving typically isn't the greatest. It's a tough job, yeah? And in the 10 years since a lot of big predictions were made about that, we've had huge, we need more truck drivers. We don't have enough. And some of the things we can automate away would be great to automate away. So I'm both bearish and bullish, but recognizing that the impact as, since the weavers in Silesia destroyed their looms in the early 1900s, it's really going to impact 1800s, impact people in very different ways.
Love that balance. That's an awesome way to answer the question. Nicole, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with the yes. I feel like I'm kind of in the middle on certain things and the, on one side and the other. I think my challenge is that there are, the tool is the tool. It's not the thing that's going to cause disruption. It's the decision makers that are going to cause a disruption. And I'm not sure how much faith I have in the system that we've seen fail before on other technological advancements. So what I think is that there's huge potential and huge opportunity, and we as a society are at this reckoning moment where we have to view it as this real turning point. So I think, there are, to the point about autonomous vehicles, truck drivers, if they are displaced, then what will they do, right? So I agree, it's a hard job, and it's a job that we have a lot of people in, and so there's a lot of decisions around, social safety nets and things that we don't always have these really rich conversations about. I also think, college costs are rising and rising and rising. So if we're asking people to now take on more college debt, or we're asking people to get more education, then we're kind of setting people up to fail. So I'm pointing this out because I agree with all of the things you said, but I also go back to the, how are we making sure that this technology is distributed in a way that is equitable and isn't driving these bigger divides? And that is, when we're relying on a government that's not the most functional to make some of these choices, and we're relying on businesses who are incentivized by their financial returns to make some of these decisions, that's where that is what I am concerned about, not the technology. I think the technology can do so many things. So.
Yeah, if I could just quickly build on that.
Go for it.
Thanks, Karim. Nicole makes an incredibly important point, and we had an earlier discussion when we first came in to do the walkthrough, beyond just the Golden Girls and the Mira television program, but we also talked about, to that very point, that the technology and the potential of the technology is absolutely incredible. It can, in fact, create a bit of a superpower for the strengths that a human and our knowledge that we can bring to bear to any sector, right? But it's going to take a collective coalition, and that's all of us in the room, public and private, to ensure that we're putting sufficient safeguards around the technology so that as with any technology, as it begins to be adopted into society, that we are thinking intentionally and early about how do we make sure that we're upskilling people sufficiently? How are we making sure that we can help individuals understand the technology is augmenting your work now in this new way? And so we're also going to invest back in you to ensure that you can use the technology so that you can make that necessary pivot. I also, to the point about the cost of education, one of the things that we were talking about is how the technology and through the education space, there's power and potential in using it as a bit of a co-pilot and for tutoring, and so that you can integrate it so it's real time and near time. One of the things that, one of the economic reports, I think the World Forum, and I think it was actually one of the headlines that showed that one of the things that we were trying to figure out, back to the early signals and just the implications on the workforce, there are going to be 4 primary sectors where we see 70% of some of that transformation happening. And again, these are early signals, so let's take it for what it is. But those 4 sectors are going to be around customer service and support, marketing and sales, software development, and R&D. Again, these are knowledge creation sectors. And what the early signals are telling us in those 4 sectors is that, yes, there's going to be pivots that are going to be required to happen in these industries. But it's not about displacing people. It's about a clear recognition that pivots must happen. But we need to move the unique human strengths on the more nuanced, complex aspects of the work. And so I really believe that's what we have to lean in on, is training people and readying them for the understanding that this technology is going to augment the way of work.
That's a great point, and it's also a really good lead into where I'd love to take the conversation about sort of skilling, displacement, and so the question I want to pose is, we've heard a lot about job loss, right? At least headlines talk about job loss. When you get a little bit more under the hood and start to look at both the research and some of the details behind the headline, you start to see that there's more nuance in this conversation. So, but I'm going to ask the non-nuanced question, let you all do the nuancing part. So, okay, do you believe we'll see job creation or job loss? Where are you at on this? And Nicole, maybe you can start us off on this one.
Yeah, I think we're going to see both, and it's going to be different based on the sector, and it's going to be different based on the skill level. And it's also going to be different based on globally where you are. Because I think, I often tend to, as a US citizen, over-index on the US-centric approach to this, and so I will try to be mindful of that. And I have a great example I'll share later about brilliant work happening in the global south that will create. In fact, I'm just going to go there now. Job creation. So data is so valuable. If we don't have data, we don't have AI. And so there is a tremendous amount of work around data collection, curation, annotation that's happening. The example I was going to share is there's an amazing organization out of India called Karya, and they are moving generations of people out of poverty by paying them an above living wage to share their data, which is such a valuable resource. I think for so long we've heard about data privacy, and we've heard about, you be careful of your data, and that is still all true. But if you speak a language that is not heavily resourced in the data, if you speak a language that is in danger of going away, you are now like the most valuable golden shiny object because data is so valuable. So I think there is a huge need and job creation opportunity there. Karya is doing incredible work finding, it's largely women that they're working with. These women are now making more than their husbands. They're having to have secret bank accounts so that they can put money. It's tremendous what is happening. And the confidence and the empowerment that is coming with this is literally life-changing, and it's changing the face of these communities. And they're expanding throughout the global south to capture more and more languages. So that is a tremendous job creation opportunity. I would also say, I have friends who are digital creatives who have, they're on their 400,000th application and they're not getting a job. And so we can't overlook the impact of certain industries. A creative, that I worked with for years and years, who is a brilliant person in her career, and advanced in her career, is just like, I now have to make a change. This is no longer the career for me. So if we can get ahead of helping people see when their job is at risk, because there are jobs at risk, and helping them reskill, upskill, find new things, that has to be a priority now, because the technology's capabilities today are not such that you should be firing your copywriting teams. 5 years from now, it might be, who knows when that's gonna happen, but that's coming, where you won't have to fact check your briefing as well. That time is coming, and so how do we get ahead of it? And that's where we'll get into more job creation. So to answer your question, it's going to be both, and I think it's going to have tremendous impacts in both. So
I think that context point is really important. I love the example. Really good use case to understand that it's not a yes or no. It's a timeline. It's a yes, and it's both that are going to occur depending upon context. So, Michael, Shanika, how would you like to?
Yeah, so I think, so who knows, right? The problem with predicting the future is we don't know it yet. I'm confident in stating that I think people who use AI in their jobs will replace people who don't use AI in their jobs. I mean, that's one general statement I would make. I talk to business owners and they might say, look at what ChatGPT, these tools, look all the marketing copy that they can put out. I don't need as many people to do marketing. I tend to think, I don't think, there's a sort of the lump fallacy that there's only so much work that can be done. I think people will just do more marketing, yeah? And I think that there are all sorts of jobs. When ATMs came out, they said we won't have any more bank tellers. And what happened for 30 years is we had a rise in the number of bank tellers because we could put banks in all sorts of new places and supplement them with, and 10 years ago, we heard about radiology. And don't have your kid become a radiologist because that's going to be obsolete. We have more radiologists today than we did 10 years ago. Who knows what it'll be in 20 years. So just another, I guess, caution about making too many predictions. But, I think this idea that, the Scottish economist, William Stanley Givan talked about a paradox when he saw that when the steam engine was created and it made the use of coal much more efficient, the idea is, okay, then we won't need to use as much coal. And they saw the exact opposite. We're using coal much more. I tend to think with some of the jobs that we're talking about that won't be replaced, it will just allow us to do more of that. And the challenge, I think, of fear of a lot of people is that, the first wave of IT automation took away a lot of, or threatened a lot of jobs that relied on routine cognitive tasks. Yeah, those could be. And now we're worried it's coming for the quote unquote real knowledge workers who are doing non-routine cognitive work. Maybe. I think it may be, we may see a redefinition of what non-routine cognitive work means. If you're a graphic designer, yeah, and I just need to hire somebody to give me a picture of a mountain, fair enough. Machine can do that. Is that a non-routine cognitive task, or are we going to change our sort of definition, how we think about these things?
Yeah, I love the point you're making about redefining work, and that's where I want to go next. Actually, I think this is a really critical topic for this group to be discussing. Before we jump into the next question, what I'd like to do is share a video clip from a professional learning series that Code.org created in partnership with Khan Academy, ISTE, and ETS. It's called AI 101 for Teachers. And the clip is going to be a conversation between Sal Khan from Khan Academy and Code.org CEO Hadi Partovi. And they're going to talk a little bit about the industry impact on AI, and it touches on this question. So if you can cue up the industry impact video.
Generative AI is going to touch every industry at every possible part of it. Now, I do want to make clear, a lot of people have started to differentiate, which I think is an important thing, between jobs and tasks. I think it's going to allow a lot of folks to do more tasks more productively, but it's not going to replace, in many cases, whole jobs. So pretty much any job where you have to do any type of writing, I think you're going to have a productivity improvement at least 2x, probably more. Any job where you have to create presentations, you have to create any type of artifact, probably.
I would say any job that involves working with a computer in any way is going to become, in some way, not replaced by AI, but easier by AI, which means whether you're writing code, whether you're reviewing contracts, if you're writing a patent, if you're reviewing a patent, if you're creating marketing, if you're posting to social media, if you're creating a spreadsheet or analyzing data with a spreadsheet, everywhere from marketing to sales to accounting, you name it, AI isn't going to replace your job. It'll make your job easier because certain tasks that are repetitive will become completely automated. Certain tasks where you might have writer's block, AI might make the first draft for you or help you out or give you corrections to basically reduce the time you need to spend to get the job done. One of the things that's important is when you think about how much all digital work is going to be impacted by AI is recognizing how critical it is that our education system teaches students what this is, how to use it, how it works, and what are its risks, what are its strengths and weaknesses. Because right now, most adults just treat it as a sort of magical tool, like, oh, it just came out and it's magic. But it's important to actually understand the underpinnings of what is a large language model, realizing that it's using statistics to generate its thoughts, to realize that statistical generation is why it can make mistakes, and recognizing that it's been trained on data, so the data that it's used to figure out what it's creating could have biases, could have missing gaps in the data, things like that. It's important for students to, as they get prepared for this workforce of the future, to know how the technology they're using in these future jobs is actually working.
So I'd love to pick up on both the conversation Sal and Hadi had and Michael's last point. And Shanika, maybe you can lead us off on this. So how do you see the way in which we work changing? Like, if we think about redefining what work means, kind of, even though we're not soothsayers, go ahead and look into that crystal ball a little bit.
So I'll wave the wand. But seriously, I think, look, we as a collective society have been here before. Our society has seen first wave. Our society has encountered inventions, new technology, and our society has learned to adapt and adjust. I have a lot of hope and faith in us as society and our collective global society. That said, when I think about the future of work, I think it's exactly what both Sal and Hadi mentioned. I see the technology and all of the signals that we see today is that the technology is going to be used as a collaborator and as a co-pilot to help create greater efficiencies, to help increase productivity. And it's going to augment the things that we as humans do to make us more efficient, to allow us to pivot our energy and our uniqueness as humans to a task, allow us to really index and focus our time and effort there. That's what I see in terms of the transformation based on all of the signals that we see. I do believe that it will be incumbent on us to lean in on the basic building blocks that we know happen in the early years, the formative years. We need to think critically. We need to understand how to communicate effectively. We need to understand how to collaborate into team. Those, the 21st century skills when I was a teacher in the classroom, these are the things, those building blocks will not change. And we must help our young people have a very strong foundation around computational thinking, right? Because again, these are tools. These tools are also created by flawed individuals, human beings. And so it's incumbent on us as we think about today's workforce and the future of workforce is that we're teaching students and professionals to interrogate the outputs from the technology. The technology is a collaborator and a co-pilot. That's what I believe and see. I see it as augmenting the strengths that are uniquely human.
Love that point. Nicole, Michael,
I would echo the executive functioning skills as like the North Star. I said this in a panel yesterday. I would amend Hadi's statement slightly by saying people need to know how to use this technology and understand this technology. They also have to understand how to exist with this technology because it's not going away. And that is the executive functioning skills that should be so front and center. I'd also say this is so important of a moment where AI literacy comes in, because if we don't understand the capabilities of the technology, then we may be laying people off who don't need to be laid off because we're over-indexing and putting too much trust in the technology. So the AI literacy component of this just can't be understated. If people are tasked with bringing big returns to their shareholders, then that's their charge. And if they think that the way to do that is not by augmenting, but by supplementing or replacing, then that's what's going to happen. So there's a literacy, an AI understanding. What can the technology do? The challenge with that, I did a study in 2021 of people's understanding of AI capabilities. And surprisingly, we found only 16% had a passing understanding of AI literacy. I'm redoing that survey now, and I often consult with people across the globe that I collaborate with. And we're getting so into the details on, does AI understand cause and effect? This person says yes, this person says no. So it's even within the field of AI, there are these big questions about the current capabilities. And so we need to solve for a general level of understanding so that people can really make smart and informed choices with how they're deploying, how they're collaborating, and how this technology is being used.
Can I just jump in really quick before Mike answers? I just want to build off a point that Nicole made. Thank you. You're gracious to me. When you think about in the space of mathematics, this thought came to mind, and one of our leaders in Google, Maggie Johnson, who understands deeply computer science, but also computer science education. And one of the points that she recently made, which I thought was exactly right, which is think about in the space of mathematics, when the calculator coming into the classroom and just mass adoption. It didn't wipe away our need to understand how to add and subtract. What it did do is it brought us together to understand that we need to have a number sense. What is the number sense and the basic knowledge that every individual needs to have in light of these tools that are available to us in mathematics. I think it's a similar thing, back to your point about artificial intelligence, AI literacy. We need to have an AI sense that is generally understood so that we understand what this is, that it's not magic. And by the way, it is flawed, right? And so with us having a baseline understanding of AI, back to your literacy point, it will set us up well to answer some of these harder questions around things like what values are being placed that are invisible into the algorithms and into the technology and into the infrastructure. So these are the things I cannot stress enough, your point, Nicole, about the literacy baseline. It's a must.
So it's about time for Q&A, but thinking of, I'm worried that a lot of the discussions around sort of AI and the workforce quickly become discussions around efficiency. Yeah, and so there are efficiency arguments and efficiency analyses we can do and we should be doing. But all of us here were involved in the grand experiment in remote learning and remote work during the fabulous thing we all went through a couple years ago. And I don't know, hopefully very few or none of you in this room had new software put on your computers, AI-enabled software to essentially surveil what you were doing. In the worry that you weren't working, or that, and then people say, oh, we can look at this now, we can actually measure efficiency of our workers in new ways. My worry is that when some of these AI tools enable us to be treated like machines ourselves, those are the exact types of functions, type of work that can be automated away. And I think, we're all educators in this room. Education is fundamentally a human endeavor. And in talking with policymakers around the world about, especially in places where there aren't teachers or there are insufficiently supported teachers, and ministers of education have said to me, we don't have teachers in these places, or they're young, or they don't know their subjects very well, and wouldn't it be great if AI could complement it maybe where they don't exist, where they could do the job of teachers. And it's, there's a place for that. But my worry is that talked about the next digital divide in education is about access to AI, who has access to it and who doesn't. My worry is that it'll become about who has access to people and who only has access to technology. Yeah. And hopefully that's not the world that we're going towards. And if we are, we will always have time, hopefully, but we have time now to think about what we might want to do to prevent that.
You're describing a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Way to bring it home, Michael. Thank you.
And I'm describing actual conversations I've had with ministers of education, addressing very real needs today.
Yeah.
And tomorrow's needs are subordinate to today's needs.
Can I just add one point too? Even if you're relying, whatever you're relying on it for today, it's also predominantly English. It's predominantly developed by a very specific group of people, and so depending on where you're over-indexing on a certain group already, because again, the technology is not advanced enough to be representational and diverse. And so, efficiency for who? What does that even look like? So.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I do want to make sure we have a little bit of time for some Q&A from you all, but I'm going to ask for one last sentence from each person. And the question I want to pose is, actually it picks up even on this last discussion. So we have a room full of very influential people here that can steer a good portion of the discussion we've just had, what the future of society and the future of work looks like, to the work they do in education. What's a piece of advice you're gonna give to these folks? And maybe Nicole, you can lead us off.
Yeah, I would say I said this yesterday on a panel, and I'll say it again as a start. Ask the dumb questions because somebody else will have them. I ask dumb questions all the time because this technology is new. There's not consensus around a lot of things. And so if you're using a tool and it seems to be underperforming or overperforming for a specific demographic, call that out, pull the fire alarm. These are the things that I think are so important as this technology develops and becomes more and more ubiquitous. And then make sure that there are spaces that are being created for learning about this technology, about the potential, about the use cases. It's a tool. It's a tool to be used. It shouldn't be the dictator. It shouldn't be the place of a human. There should always be a human decision maker at the end of the use of a tool like this.
Thanks, Nicole. Shanika?
Yeah, I would go to the point of a coalition. It's going to take all of us in this room, public, private, to collectively explore the opportunities of this technology, but also to put sufficient safeguards in place to ensure that we're harnessing the technology for good. And so that's what I would say. We need collective action together to solve for this. It's not for engineers to solve. It's not for, government to solve. We have to do it together. The last thing I would also say is I know that there's also some energy around fear around this technology. And to coin something, I'm going to terribly paraphrase Marie Curie, but this point that she made in a quote, which is fear can be driven out through knowledge. And so take the time to build your understanding of the opportunity and get caught doing the work to try to make sure that we're putting the safeguards in place together so that we're not leaving anyone behind.
Yeah, Nicole said if you're using the tools. I mean, hopefully you're using the tools, yeah? I mean, that's the big deal. I was talking with an expert, AI and education expert, and he was talking to me about some of the image generation stuff and talking about using Midjourney, and I mentioned Discord, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I'm wondering what this guy is actually doing. I later found out that, he was an expert in crypto a year and a half ago, and so there are people moving into these spaces. But just, I put aside an hour a day, which I don't have, literally to just be immersed in tools. I mean, immersed in the tools all day long anyway. But if this new world of work is dawning on us, and it's going to happen, we may as well be in it as soon as we can. And just use this stuff, ask dumb questions, and look dumb too, because you got to look dumb before you look less dumb.
Well, we're gonna end on that note. So you all have your call to actions out there, and let's go to some Q&A from y'all. We've got just under 10 minutes. So. And I can't see anything, so if the lights can go up, that'd be great.
Hi.
Looks like we have a. Sorry. Oh
I think they've handed me a mic, so I'm going to start way over here on the corner.
Oh my gosh, there you are. Hello.
Hi. My name is Leanda Leiser. I'm the Executive Director of Computer Science for All. And I love the conversation. Thank you so much for thinking about this intersection of work, which is actually the foundational way many people pay to live in this country and exist with some kind of subsistence. And I really love that notion of computational thinking combined with computational questioning. It's really important that we understand not just that technology can be right or wrong. I'm curious about how we bring into the conversation how it's wrong. The notion of, instead of an error rate, an error matrix, right? If you're trying to detect breast cancer, you want it to be wrong more saying somebody might have a problem than saying they're all clear, right? Just like if we're trying to leap over a chasm, we'd rather leap too far than too short, right? And so how do we bring the conversation of how it's wrong, not just that it's wrong, into the bigger picture?
Thoughts?
I mean, so how do we do it? One thing we do is we insist in various ways or agitate for, evangelize for tools that would help us understand what these tools are actually doing. So things, transparency. If we are going to have set up these matrices and be able, to actually understand what's happening, understand where there might be, alignment problems. Imagine everyone in the room is familiar with that term. I think one thing that we can all do collectively, and that we can only do collectively, really, is educate for more transparency. There was a tool released maybe early this week or last week around the transparency of some of these AI tools that found them all basically wanting in ways that were both subtle and profound. And I think absent some of the ability to have insights into what's happening, that will constrain our ability to do exactly what you suggest.
Yeah, I would add too, there has to be more space and patience for when things come out as wrong. And the example that I go back to is, Amazon, we all heard Amazon had a hiring tool that they were developing that was over-indexing on rejecting women and people of color, because if you said you were part of a specific team or you said the word women in your resume, it was over-indexing on rejecting those applications. The tool was a brilliant case study in bias, it wasn't rolled out, so they didn't use it. And it was, instead of them diving in and publicly having that conversation, it was like the PR team or whoever said, we got to shut it down. And we need more of those learnings, because that is a brilliant case study in so many different types of learning. And right now AI can read a lung cancer give a lung cancer diagnosis better than a radiologist. That's one of the things it does very well. And to get there, it had to be wrong a lot and it had to be right a lot. And so, those are the things that are sort of happening behind the scenes. But the more we publicly share those, I think the better. And play around. If you ask ChatGPT today and you don't have the extra boosted GPT-4 version, you're very likely going to get really made up citations. That's a great way to play around. Check the citations, use your critical thinking, check check their work. And so I think playing around with the tools is another way to see how they're wrong and to really get an understanding of what is happening under the covers. Because right now, we also, we could have a whole other panel on, open models versus closed models and transparency and what that means. And at AI2, we really push for, moving from a black box to a glass box, because in order to solve some of these open research questions, we need to be able to get into the full stack of the model in order to understand what it's doing and when and why. And so also moving towards this more open and transparent research is critical.
Could I just hit 30 seconds
Yeah,
quickly? Just really quickly, I would point to a number of frameworks. So Google has a responsible AI framework. Singapore has released a framework as well. And what's lovely about a number of these frameworks is they provide a whole host of questions. Because net, our philosophy is that those closest to the problem space must be armed with a set of questions, and they must determine this idea and this notion of right and wrong, right? So really, I would lean in on the frameworks that provide some guiding questions to help lead towards this idea of having a conversation about what's right, what's wrong in terms of these inputs and outputs.
I would also add the people who are impacted should also be at the table from the beginning, and that's not always what's happening, unfortunately. And so that solves a lot of different problems. Even in the executive order that came out this week, the voices of workers was part of the order that Biden had put forth. And so bringing people to the table sooner in the process versus getting just the application or just the way it's used is a tremendous opportunity.
All right, I'm going to try and make sure we get 2 more questions in here. So I think David's got a question right here.
Yes, thank you. Senator Wellman from Washington State, and I chair education. But I started my career on mainframes, so I go way back. And to me, I think a lot of what we have to do is to translate what is happening for people, whether it's within our schools, whether it's within our legislatures, to get them to move things that they have to move. And for me, I go back to Warnock and Getchke and say, hey, PostScript was AI. PostScript took what we had to use machines to code, and it turned it into something that went to a printer and did what it did. But also, within 2 years, 1,500 typesetters in the United States were gone. They were no longer needed. That job was over. And I think that, that's really important. So we go way back with AI. It's different with generative AI, where we actually can pose the question. The rest of us can now have that added capability. A GUI is an AI, that we've had for years. And I think, just to say, there is a movie that I think would be very useful just to take a look at, which is called Knowledge Navigator. And it talks about the interaction with the human and AI, and it was produced by Apple in 1987. It's on YouTube, and I think we have to make it comfortable for people as well, because this can get really scary fast. So just some comments.
Yeah, thank you for adding those comments and great resources and great points that you made. Let's go, how about over in this side of the room? We'll take a question. I see a hand kind of in the middle over here. Maybe David? Okay, thank you.
Alix Gallagher from Policy Analysis for California Education. My question is actually about this concept of coalitions and getting the end user involved. And I wonder, given the comments that you made before about the nature of the governments that we have right now, and also the incentives that the private sector has, how will those spaces get created? And how are people who feel like they are end users, what paths do you see to empowering them to get into those spaces if they don't see where they exist?
Shanika, do you want to field that one?
I love that you threw me that question. I think that's an incredible question. I wish I had the answers. I do not. I think from my vantage point, it's about deliberate action. I think a lot of it's going to have to be grassroots. I think it also has to be anchored in intentional knowledge and understanding the space. I think this group, we have a lot of power. We have more power than we realize, and I think it's going to require us to take some risks, ask hard questions of both the industry but also the government. But I don't know if I have the answer. I just know that we can't solve this unless we try to solve it together. I'll throw that over to my other colleagues.
I would add, when we work on research, when we work on creating models, we need to do a better job of including people, and we are starting to move that way. We just rolled out some new processes that involve people at the beginning, so we're, one of the things that's interesting is people who are creating the foundation models today are not always thinking about the use cases because it is a baseline technology. And so when you look at the full pipeline, there are so many different inflection points. So I think there is responsibility throughout that process. We have a responsibility to, as we're creating a model, what are the potential use cases and how are we bringing in those voices? I'm working on a project now where we are doing a survey and a study with people to brainstorm potential use cases and talk about values aligned with those types of things. That's one example of where we should have ownership as a research organization. People who are developing technology and developing apps built on top of these models absolutely should be having conversations with people who will be impacted. And then there are, again, back to the executive order, NIST is going to be putting out safety standards right in the public comment. There will be, I'm sure, a public comment process. Do it. It seems like you may be lost in the shuffle, but they read them. And so participating in the democracy that we are in the US as an example, to be US-centric, is a way to get your voice to be heard. And so I would encourage that, having just written a copyright comment that just was due last week, so.
A thought just came to mind, and I see you. I was just going to mention, Brookings Institute actually did a survey not quite a year ago, 20 countries and states, global. They actually looked at a coalition model around how computer science education, how these specific geographies were able to drive adoption. I would say take a look at it. It's a Brookings Institute recent report. I think it's called Skills for Everyone, and it did this global survey. And Arkansas actually was spotlighted as one that had done an effective job of building a coalition. They were called out in that report.
So I'm sorry, we gotta wrap up here. The countdown is getting pretty tight here, and we've got folks. But the good news is, all three of our wonderful panelists are going to be here a little bit after the panel and here throughout the day. So please follow up with them on the questions that we didn't get to, and even questions that we did that we want to dig into. Please help me thank our panelists, Nicole, Shanika, and Michael, for doing this panel.